So last time we talked about new metrics being forks in code complexity that Matt and I were each taking action items on.
Which I didn't do.
No, I didn't either. With yeah, I didn't really think like the way that I work generally was gonna it would make a big difference to have everything disrupted all week, but that was wrong. Think about centrality, stewards, and stakeholder analysis, and then classifying labels into buckets, which is it's a task I can do, but from a database perspective, just basically look at all the labels that are used across projects and create a map of what labels are synonyms with each other, so that if one project calls it a defect, a project calls it a bug, that all those words can be put into a bucket or a dictionary where they mean the same thing. And we can start to look at classification of different kinds of issues that are opened. Okay. So I had a task to identify the key research, and so did Johan in the field identifying core structured taxonomies, because there are some structured taxonomies, most of which emerge out of the Bugzilla world where a taxonomy already existed for defining and explaining the kinds of issues that are open. Mm-hmm. And I would say that is started but not finished. I have an accumulation of labels, but I'm not quite sure how to share it. In other words, it's a large list, and it feels like my instinct is that there's probably a good way to use a software program of some kind. And I'm not crying because I'm sad, but because I think my allergies. If you're noticing,
it's fine.
You're noticing the tear dripping down my face.
I'm Claritin myself, so yeah. my sympathies.
Yeah.
The molds are up high here.
Yeah. So in Missouri, we don't know if we have the COVID or we're just allergic like we always are.
What I'm wondering, what I kind of want to do is effectively have a whiteboard, an equivalent of a whiteboard with stickies, and start to do quite frankly, a grouping exercise. And I don't know what online facility lets us do that, but I'd be game for doing a session where we could just sort of have some sort of screen share, and we just start moving stickies around into buckets equivalently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I just don't know what tools are out there that would let us, dynamically shift things around.
It's similar to the Kanban board, like where you keep on sticking some in the to-do column.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It's sort of like coming up with a set of items for the words, and then us either figuring columns we slot them under, or randomly moving them around and then putting circles around similar things, which is what we do if you're in person. But I like the notion of doing some sort of exercise like that through the whole word dictionaries.
I think
and if you, like I say, actually, Sean, if you wanted to give me if you wanted to basically send me the master list of words, I can take a first stab, and then we can maybe iterate from that. Mm-hmm. That's something I can do. Actually, I probably enjoy myself doing it, so yeah, I'll volunteer for that. I like this sort of thing. So
okay. Yeah, what I'm thinking is that we can use the existing literature and an initial scan of the words that are in there. So the literature doesn't cover things that are showing up in the tags like UX or user interface and things like that, more emergent topics that weren't studied 10 years ago when a lot of these papers were brought out. So maybe combine literature and a little open and axial coding.
Well, I think what would be kind of nice is just to basically go through all the labels and just do a count. off of GitHub to the extent that we can just, you can, if you can program a search for it and then just tell how many projects have which labels. So like basically an ID for the label ID and then the count of number of projects behind it that are showing that ID.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take those and those are what we sort into buckets.
Yeah, I can, I could do that. It's basically just running a query that I already have across the 20 or 25 different Augur instances that we have running that have that data. Okay. And the list and the counts are, I mean, that's relatively easy. And it also, I mean, it becomes a massive list, but you can quickly shorten it by only focusing on the top N.
Yeah. So yeah, like I say, if you can get me, the list, like I say, I think having the counts of how many projects have those labels in use is important. But having, the ID and then how many projects have the same label. If you can get me that effectively as, a massive spreadsheet, mm-hmm. I can probably do a pass of trying to do some elements of groupings and sorting and things like that.
I can do that.
I find spreadsheets rather soothing, and I guess I can just start putting a tag and then we can just sort by the tags in the spreadsheet, like take another column and just start putting a general categorization and then grouping.
Okay.
Yeah, like I say, spreadsheets are fun for me. It's one of my sicknesses.
All right, I will get you that.
Okay, I'll try to get that ready then for our next meeting. Yeah, that's something that's fun. I've got a rainy week too.
I'm just giving myself how do I all right, just made myself a note to do that. Mm-hmm. In here. And then I had a note to talk about forks. I don't remember why though. I guess there was a new metric on forks that we were looking at, and realize now maybe it would be helpful if I shared my screen.
I am here, sort of. But forks, you had forks on the agenda because I was supposed to start the metric.
Right.
Which that was the thing I didn't do. So.
Okay. All right. I'll just set right.
Right.
I'll just right.
When you're saying forks, are we talking about the forks that, from a project based on GitHub, or how are you thinking of it?
I was just going to start it kind of based on GitHub. So the idea was, sorry for the squeaking dog.
No, it's good. Love it.
I was just going to start the template of the metric, upon which we could kind of talk through those kinds of questions. So I wasn't kind of formalizing anything out of the gate. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
And it's same story for code complexity. And Augur has code complexity estimated by file using the Kokomo algorithm. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that might be kind of fun that I'm having to deal with from another perspective is there's various safe. So MISRA is used in a lot of, as a baseline for a lot of safety standards.
MISRA, M-I-Z-R-A.
MISRA. There's a MISRA coding guidelines, which is a proprietary set of, well, it's an ISO standard, quote unquote. Well, it's a standard that you have to pay to get access to. And there's a lot of commercial tools out there that sort of already do a scan for them. But it tends to get used as a basis for a lot of safety argumentation. And it has elements of guidelines in there for, coding style things that might relate, well, that can relate literally, I think, to complexity. And so it might be kind of an interesting angle to take a look at some of those guidelines and use that as a way on the code complexity, and see if there's something you might want to just, proxy from the MISRA guidelines or something like that.
And there might be some software tools as well.
Oh, there are software tools available. Various commercial compilers already have it built in, that they'll scan for these things. And like Coverity has in their for cost suite. My challenge has been literally finding things that are open sourced in this area, but there are tools out there that do this as part of a commercial ecosystem. So we might be able to get a donated tool to run, or something like that. And we can ask around.
So I had a kind of a question on this too, not MISRA. So I don't know if you said what you needed to say, Kate.
Yep, I did.
Okay. I was also thinking about libraries, Sean. Libraries IO.
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with it at this point, and I think it falls squarely in the risk area. And so, do we want to start thinking about in the CHAOSS project supporting libraries IO or integrating it into Augur, or I mean, is that even something we want to think about? And you could speak a lot better to that.
I mean, we know that the libraries.io code base is not going to be maintained going forward. And we know that fairly conclusively now. It's Tidelift has absorbed it, and the people who coded it open source have other things that they're doing. They are willing to configure a version of it to collect data for us, but have that not be open to the world, because one of the challenges they faced when it was open to the world is people would just consume it without paying them in any way. And it costs server time. So we could incorporate it into Augur in a similar way that we've incorporated Facade, DoSOX, and SEC, which is a complexity and code lines of code counting tool. So, and I do actually, when I designed the new relational data model for Augur, I did a lot of analysis on the libraries.io schema, and there's most of the tables in that schema I would characterize as sort of service tables. It exists in the service of tracking things inside of libraries.io, and there's really only one table that has the bulk of the information. So
the bulk of the dependency information, or the bulk of the Augur information? The
bulk of the dependency information. And so I think refactoring that, excuse me, libraries.io code, similar to how we refactored the schema for Facade, and this seems much simpler actually, might make a lot of sense. And so I think it's something that Augur is interested in taking on, and maybe it would be a task for either a Google Summer of Code student. Most likely it's a pretty good discrete task to have a Google Summer of Code student take on.
I think it's a great idea. I'm personally, so I'm like torn. I'm personally hugely in favor of it, but I'm also not responsible for the technical integration. So I'm like, yes, do it. And then I can just walk away.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's sounding so much like management, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea. Why don't you all do that? And then tell me how it goes. So my thing is, people clearly care about dependencies, and people obviously know libraries.io. It's got pretty good name recognition. Not that that matters, but I think people would be extremely appreciative. That's all.
So one of the things libraries.io handles part of the elephant of dependency tracking, which is package dependencies that exist in package managers or can be discerned from package managers. What it doesn't track are sort of like import dependencies. So it covers one part of the coin. It doesn't cover the other. And but I also think import dependencies are perhaps a little bit less complicated to track because every language has its own way of declaring imports. And it does seem to me that what GitHub is doing right now with its GitHub will tell you if you're relying on a package and it isn't up to the latest best secure version, which is helpful. And I think there's two approaches we could take. We could scan all that ourselves, or we could see if GitHub has opened up an API that lets us pull that. But that wouldn't solve the problem for other platforms. Although GitHub continues to be the dominant platform, but maybe not the one we're partnering with.
Sean, can I add something over there? So when I was looking at it, GitHub had like, if you have declared your dependency in the dependency file, that they were pulling, not all the import files. Like if I've used in Python import this,
right.
They were not tracking that. If I have openly declared in my dependency that these are the libraries I'm dependent on, they are counting those.
Okay, so it's not even quite that good.
Yes.
So it's basically doing the libraries.io level of work.
Yes.
Okay. So much for that idea. And there were some imperfections in the libraries.io data that required cleanup on our part as well. And they and there are definitely challenges when we're working with libraries.io. For example, a lot of libraries depend on the exact same repo. So we had, I think, an average of 50 and as many as like 1,600 different libraries that were embedded in different path structures of any one repository. And this sort of makes sense because what they're doing is creating the compilable code for different operating systems within which these libraries might be imported or used.
So maybe the way to think about it is kind of that moving up zero. I've been using that phrase for
yeah. Get started with what we have. Yeah.
Better than nothing. And I'm afraid libraries is just going to kind of fall into like a state of disrepair.
Yeah, I mention these things only to manage expectations.
Yeah, okay.
Not to say don't do it. It's more like recognize it won't solve the whole problem, but it will. It'll get us. Yeah, it's better than zero. It is moving off of zero for sure.
Okay.
All right.
That was it. I wanted to capture that. So thank you for chiming in.
All right, my action item. I used to be able to like, I used to be able to just like comment on something, and maybe if I do like.
What are you trying to do? Ashon, do the at sign.
Yeah, you got these as just a zero.
There it is. Assigned to Sean. Perfect. That's how that worked. The next thing on our agenda was stakeholder influence. And I'm wondering if we have this over here. under risk.
Mm-hmm.
Stakeholder influence. So we did create a Google Doc for that. That is blank. But it does have a link to a couple Springer articles. So these work towards, I think, your elephant factor and your bus factor.
How many people have a vested interest effectively in making sure it continues?
Yeah, I think so.
Is it also potentially subscribers? If in certain models, like the Tidelift one, for instance.
Yeah, the power structures are part of this first or second paper. And this is essentially, and I think we talked about this last time, using network analysis to try to understand who is, which pull requests, which pieces of code are moving, are sort of dominated by one or more people, and then how do those patterns of influence propagate throughout the rest of the system.
Oh, you're thinking of more from the developer perspective as opposed to those who have a financial interest in it.
This one seems more developer focused, but I think the other one looked at firms specifically. So there's this one here has firms called out specifically. And I can get I can probably get access by changing to VPN and pulling it down. I think Johan may have actually shared the text with me as well.
Okay.
So that's wait a minute. Stakeholder influence. So we have forks down here actually. I was talking about stakeholder influence, so I don't yeah, I don't think we yeah. So this should say stakeholder influence. I think I copied a template and didn't edit it. Because if I go to forks, so I don't know if we want to, I think stakeholder influence is it's a more complex one that may require a little bit more back research than forks. I don't know if we want to spend a little time defining forks today. Because forks code, so we have forks on the agenda: code complexity, stakeholder influence, and issue types update. And the issue types update we actually already talked about with the accumulation of labels. Code complexity, I have a to-do for, and Matt, you had a to-do for something as well. Or you had a to-do for forks. So Matt and I had to-dos for these. Stakeholder influences, pretty complex. And then the issue type update was already covered under the labeling. That's kind of where that's headed. What are folks' thoughts on what to do with the time that we have remaining, 23 minutes?
Yeah, I'm going to not be able to go right to the top of the hour. I've got to go, quite frankly, get tea before my next call.
That's a fair, that is totally fair.
So let's plan on ending 10 minutes before, so I actually can. a little bit of a saying
I've
like,
been
thank you.
seeking coffee, so.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. I'll let you finish that. I had one thing I wanted to talk about too a little bit.
Yeah, go for it, because I think we have time for that.
It was just we have so in this risk working group we have kind of the luxury of having Kate who participates in this. And what I mean by that is the discussion that came up in the board meeting on Friday, which was asking the working groups to think about how the metrics that they're putting forward are actually making an impact in the world. You know what I mean? Like other than just a working group coming up with metrics for metrics' sake.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it now. And the luxury of having Kate here is obviously you're like super connected with not only BLF, but other groups as well. So a lot of the conversations that you bring are about what you're seeing in the world and how you want those things to be translated and captured here in this group. So I mean, that's what I mean by the luxury.
Yeah. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that we may be able to pull Jessica back too.
Okay.
Oh, that would be fantastic, because I think her medical device experience is missed.
I think it is too, and I think it's just a question of letting her get through this current crisis, because I suspect she's getting pulled into this as well.
Oh,
and the new job. What?
Yeah, her new job is probably.
Yeah, well, she's at the FDA, and so there was all the.
She's at the FDA?
Yes.
Oh, so she's probably being. Why aren't these tests approved? Where are our tests?
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's. She actually showed up on one of the ATIA calls. Actually, she got pulled into one of those by her. Here, so she started, like I say, she's starting to become visible again. And I suspect that if we give her another couple months, we should be able to probably try. We can reach out and see if we can get her pulled back.
Okay.
Because I think she liked this area too.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
In her job as well, eventually. So it's all goodness.
And there was a workshop that Sean was going to go to. Maybe Sean and myself. It was Capital One.
Yeah, yes. Kate was going to be there too. I have a feeling.
You're going to go too, Kate? Okay, so
yeah,
obviously
I was going to. I've gone virtual. I've got also Alan Friedman lined up from NTIA.
Okay, so like these kinds of things. That's really what I'm talking about. And like I said, I think risk is inherently good in this regard. But it's just something I want to always continue to.
Has that conference officially declared that it's going virtual?
I got an email from John Mark, and he said that we're going virtual at least reorganizing around putting content underneath GitHub for now. So he still wants to keep going with the brainstorming. He wants it there. It's just a question of how do we. So from my perspective, I'll start shifting a lot of the stuff I do about software bill of materials and then analysis into some sort of presentation there.
So is it worth in the working groups, this is working groups more broadly, to start documenting where the working groups are having an impact so that we can talk more consistently about it?
It might be, so that we all have a common set of messaging.
Yeah, maybe that's, I would totally just thought about that while you were talking.
No, yeah,
so
what we might want to do actually is start to work on, why don't we just start as a group starting to work on a gold slide deck together? Okay, because I do this with my other projects in the sense that if there's a clean director, like I say, when I'm a director and a few others, I have a gold deck that I basically share with all the other participants.
Yeah.
To quite frankly, tell me when I'm wrong, as well as to make sure that we're all roughly on the same page. And given there's a lot of interest in this stuff, having some of this stuff as common slides that people can pull from, kind of might help with the explanation. I'm probably gonna have to go back and redo that actually now that I think about it for SPDX too.
Why don't Sean? You can assign, that's a great idea. Sean, you can assign that to me along with the other thing I didn't do.
Okay.
You can assign me anything at this point, I don't care. But that's a really good idea. And I would bring that up. That's probably something I'd bring up to all of the working groups.
And just, put up a common location and say, and then seed it with some slides. And they don't have to be perfect, but people are much better if they react.
Yeah, and certain working groups, obviously with like the D&I think is having a really nice impact. It's pretty easy to to articulate those things. But evolution, a little bit trickier. Value is actually restarting again. So
Oh, is it? Okay.
it looks like Matt Broberg from opensource.com is going to start leading that group.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you know Matt, super nice guy. Our third Matt in the group. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have a high mat density.
we do, strangely. All right. Well, I'm gonna get going because
Yeah. I have a quick question for Kate, but let's stop recording.
okay. Then I'll see you later, everybody.
See you later, Matt.
Sure.
Hey, Kate, I was just going to ask you, do you have any kind of internal insights about the health and
We're
sustainability
recording still.
Oh, we are recording still?
Yeah, Vinod's a host at this point now.
Vinod, can you stop recording?
Okay. How do I stop? I don't know.
At the bottom,
Okay.
probably.